Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this Pandemic Wednesday edition of Wall Dropping History. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Waldrop, and I have with me the lovely Elizabeth Waldrop. Here is my co-host to help me out today. And today we're going to talk about a kind of interesting plague, but before we do, I want to go ahead and get to the agenda. So Monday we did the history of lynching. If you didn't get a chance to see that, it's a really rough episode. I'm not going to lie, it was tough even doing it. The research for it was probably even more difficult. So really rough episode, but really informational episode. Tuesday I was off doing some AP testing. Thursday I'm going to be off doing AP testing. Of course, today's Pandemic Wednesday. And then Friday I'm going to talk about the culture of immigrants. So if you still want to send in that story about your immigrant story, I would love to get that. Please send that in. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's fine. Let me go ahead and get some shout-outs. Thank you for joining us, Quinn. Thank you for joining me, Lee, DeHavius, and the lovely Rachel Waldrop. So thank y'all all for joining us. And for anybody that's watching after the fact, thank you for tuning in. Always a pleasure to have you with us. And thank you for your dedication to your education. Okay, so today we're talking about the Antoine Plague. Right, the Antoine Plague. Now, this is a really odd plague. I'd actually never even heard of it. Mostly because it kind of gets overshadowed. But, you know, when we talk about these plagues, one of the things I always want to do is I want us to try to figure out what can we learn from it, right? Because we're all in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody's having a good time. This isn't anybody's idea of what they want their summer to be like. And I don't think the end of the effect of this plague is going to be anytime soon, right? Like, the reality of it is, I think we all kind of are aware that this is probably changing our society for the long term, right? It may be something as simple as we don't shake hands anymore. It may be something as serious as from now on, when you enter a classroom, you got to have to sanitize your hands. You know, big things, little things, all kinds of things, right? So, this world is going to change as we know it. And thank you for joining us, Kira. And so one of the things I'm constantly asking, I ask doctors, teachers, I ask students, I ask anybody and everybody I can find, how do you see this ending, right? Like, where do you see the finish line? What does the finish line look like? And so one of the things I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to do a plague with a happy ending. Right now, to get to it, obviously, like most stories, you're going to have to go through a lot of crap to get to the happy at the end, right? So we're going to kind of have to suffer through some pretty gory stuff to get to the happy ending. But I did want to see a plague that kind of had a happy ending to it, right? So we're going to talk about the Antoine Plague. So, the Antoine Plague is going to start in 165 AD. Now, this is kind of at the peak of the Holy Roman Empire, if you will. It's going to be after Jesus has already walked around. Christianity is starting to spread, but it hasn't quite spread yet. But the Roman Empire is taking up, of course, you can see the size of it. Most of Europe, the Middle East, they got troops spread all over the continents, right? They're all over the place, right? And the empire's still expanding, right? So this is kind of like prime real estate for when you talk about the Roman Empire, right? This is at its peak of its powers, if you will, right? So here's the question I kind of have is, why is an empire spreading out a problem when it comes to disease? So what do you think, Elizabeth? What's the problem with it? Right. Well, it's you know, you think about that old adage of all roads lead to Rome, right? I don't know if you ever heard of that expression. Anyways, the overall idea is, at one point in time, every road on this planet pretty much was built by the Romans. And of course, they're going to have every road take you to Rome. So it wasn't just an adage, it was like an actual literal thing, right? If you could find a road, that road led to Rome, right? So, the good to it is, obviously it's great for trade. It's great for exchanging ideas, exchanging culture, information, goods, services, all that stuff. The bad to it, as you put out, is somebody gets sick anywhere else on the planet, well, if they hop on the road, they're taking it to Rome. So we see this kind of problem today, right? Like, think about it. Where did the virus really impact us the worst, right? It's places like New York, right? New York was hit so hard. And that's because it is an international hub, right? So one of the problems with a empire spreading out is that it opens up the floodgates to disease anywhere, right? I mean, think about it. If we didn't have international flights to China, we don't have COVID-19. It never makes it here, right? If we go back in time to pre-1800s, we would have never even known COVID-19 happened. It would have never known, because it would have never made it to the U.S.
That's the truth.
So that's the pro and the con. So that was kind of my point, is trying to get to the point of it's one of the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? The more spread out, the more diverse, the more access to other cultures you have, the good of having all that extra access, but the bad of, something I always used to warn about is, I'm as pro-immigration as anybody, but one of the reasons I fight so hard for legal immigration is I don't want illegal immigration. I would rather legal immigration be easy, because I don't want people spreading pandemics. Like it's a for real problem, right? Which we're seeing now. Now, many of these troops would be sent out and rotated from their foreign posts and foreign lands, right? So, like if you're a troop in Egypt, you're going to be on a rotation. Some people go out, some people come back, right? You don't just move to Egypt for the entirety. And troops are coming in from all over the Middle East, right? You got to come in from Egypt, Turkey, East Thrace area, and they would eventually bring in this disease into Rome, right? So somebody gets sick somewhere in the Middle East, and they bring this disease into Rome. Now, the disease they believe they brought into Rome is smallpox. So this is where Europe first encounters smallpox. Now, you've probably heard of smallpox. You probably heard of it as the disease that wiped out the Latin world, right? This is the disease that just absolutely destroyed the Aztecs and the Incans and the Mayans, right? It's this disease. So the kind of question I've had is, have you ever heard of chicken pox? Anybody here had chicken pox?
Yes, me.
You've had chicken pox? I'll tell you, I got it real bad when I was a kid. And this is not the same as chicken pox, but it's kind of in the wheelhouse of chicken pox. Of course, chicken pox is not nearly as deadly as smallpox. And so what are some symptoms you associate with chicken pox?
There's like little bitty bumps on
Yeah, you get all those little bumps on you. What's the problem with those little bumps?
I have no clue.
They're real itchy. In fact, I got them real bad when I was a kid. And man, I tell you...
I know I had them whenever I was like 2, 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really, really itchy. Most of y'all have had chicken pox vaccinations. So now we have a vaccination.
I had it as a kid. So
let me tell you, if you're not vaccinated, you want to get vaccinated, because if you don't have it and you wait till you're an adult, it actually hits adult much worse, and they call it shingles. And boy, it is rough. As a matter of fact, I had a friend of mine in high school, I'd like to kill him, getting chicken pox when they were an adult. So if you've not had that vaccination, make sure you get it. So smallpox is a virus that causes fever, then vomiting, right? So you think you just got a really bad stomach flu. Eventually, sores start to pile up on your mouth and on your skin. The rash then turns into these fluid-filled bumps, and you can see the picture of it right there, with a dent in the center. Now, these bumps will eventually scab over and falling off, leaving scars. Yeah, it's a kind of gory virus. Finally, the victim would begin to vomit up the scabs from the inside.
Wait, meaning like it...
Yeah, those little bumps are on the inside of the stomach. It's disgusting. I know. So the mortality rate of this disease is around 30%. Now keep in mind, COVID-19 is a little over 3%. So it's literally 10 times worse than COVID-19. It's also more infectious. The disease would go out on to wipe out most of the Latin world. They were especially susceptible to it. It really, really decimated them. So why do you think the disease would harm natives in the Americas so much worse than Europeans? So why do you think that is? Why do you think? Because mortality rate in Europe is around 30%. In the Latin world, it was as high as 90% in some places. Why do you think it messed up the Latin world so much worse?
They didn't have the right equipment.
Well, I kind of think about it. You'll delay your lunch. And this is a gory one, right? I kind of think about it in terms of, the good and the bad of the Roman Empire. The bad of it is you're going to spread disease. The good of spreading disease is if you survive that disease, your immune system's that much better. One of the reasons they bring in black people from Africa is at the time they had the best immune systems on the planet. And part of that was because disease just spread in Africa so much better. It's a tropical, lush rainforest area, in like the Congo and stuff. And anytime you have more biodiversity, you're going to have more disease, right? So one of the problems that the Latin world faced was they just didn't have immunities, right? They'd never survived the bubonic plague or the Justinian flu or any of these other plagues, and they had not survived. They didn't have the advanced immune system that Europeans had had. So it just really came in and wiped them out, right? So this infection can be airborne up to 6 feet, right? So it's airborne, just like COVID-19. But the easiest way to get it is through touch. It is extremely contagious through touch. It's almost like you're walking around with poison ivy all over your skin.
Is it still around today?
Oh yeah. Well, let me say this: it is in theory still exists today, but we've all but eradicated it, right? Through the use of vaccinations. So through vaccinations and immunity, it's something that once you get, you're immune to. You'll never have it again, right? So why do you think this impacted how we treated those that were infected, right? If you saw this disgusting virus, how do you think that impacted how we treated them?
They couldn't be touched.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. If I'm a doctor, I'm not going near that. Even though the mortality rate is still not great, 30%. Man, you talk about a gruesome way to die, coughing up scabs, and it's not fun, right? It looks like something out of a horror movie, right? Like when you see that, my first initial reaction is, no, I don't want any part of that. Get me out of here. I'm not fooling with that mess. So what do you think? How do you think the people that were infected, how do you think they were treated? I sit there and think about the leper colonies and so on and so forth. But how do you think they were treated? Leave your comments in the comment section below. So once the virus hits Rome, the impact would be immediate. At one point, it's killing as much as 2,000 to 5,000 people a day. It would take the life of one of its emperors at 39. And I started to call this the emperor-killing virus because that's really where it gets its name. It's because it does kill. They had 2 emperors that were like these brothers that were emperors. So how do you think the loss of life was especially difficult to deal with, given the nature of the disease, right? And one of the things I think about is, think about these dead bodies piling up.
Imagine doing an autopsy on them to see
No kidding, I wouldn't touch that body.
Imagine doing an autopsy on them, okay? They've been dead for
right.
however long, and they have scabs on the inside.
Well, how do you
No.
How do you collect the dead? I'm not collecting those dead bodies. How do you do it?
I don't know.
I'm not touching. You got 5,000 dead people walking around, and I'm not touching those bodies. So, that made it an extra, because I can't begin to describe, it is super, super contagious to the touch. If you touch somebody, you're probably going to get it, if your skin touches their skin. Of course, it's also airborne, too, so it made it really difficult collecting the dead. So, the guy that got it is a guy named Lucius Aurelius Varius Augustus. And he was the co-emperor, along with his adopted brother, Marcus Aurelius Antonius. And that's where it gets its name, right? The Antoine virus, right, is from Marcus Aurelius. Now, they were the first to be co-emperors, right? Up until Caesar, you had an emperor, but they were adopted brothers, so that they decided, hey, we're brothers, we're going to rule this thing together, right? It'd be like if you and Joe decided, hey, we're just going to rule this empire as a brother-sister combo, right? So to try to heal him, they would call upon the greatest doctors that they could get, right? I mean, this is the richest empire on earth, with the most knowledge on earth, the most access to education. They're going to call upon the greatest doctors they can find. So my kind of question is, how would you react if your brother was hit with such an illness? And let's say you're an emperor. What measures would you take to save your brother?
Every one of them. But I would not touch it.
Right, I mean, you may not want to touch him, but I mean, you can imagine why they would call upon the greatest doctors on the planet, right? I mean, if you have that access to technology, and you have that power, I sit there and think about it. The thing that kind of reminds me is how Germany, I'm sorry, how Russia reacted with the sick son, as you saw the Tsar kind of let his country go to hell in a handbasket, letting this Rasputin guy mess him over, because he kind of had the attitude of, I don't really care about my country as much as I care about my son. And I think about it too, like, I kind of think back to that question we asked about the cats, right? The whole question of, how many cats would I be willing to sacrifice to save my brother? And the answer is all of them. If it saved my brother, there's no limit, right? So in 165 AD, a doctor named Claudius Gallienus, or Galen, of Pergamon, had become the most accomplished medical researcher in all of antiquity. He was the son of a wealthy Greek by the name of Aurelius Nikon, and he was one of the most educated people on the planet at that time. He'd become an expert in anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, and neurology. He was a master of philosophy and logic, so right, super smart dude, right? He's usually the smartest guy in the room, right? He would become the personal physician of several European emperors, but could not save Lucius. And, I want you to read what he wrote, his first-hand account of trying to deal with it. He says, on my arrival in Aquileia, the plague attacked more destructively than ever before. So the emperors fled immediately to Rome with a small force of men. For the rest of us, survival became very difficult for a long time. Most indeed died, the efforts of the plague being exacerbated by the fact that this was occurring in the middle of winter. Flight did not save Lucius Verus, who died on the road back to Rome, portedly of apoplexy, and was given full funeral honors with apotheosis. Marcus Aurelius was in the imperial capital. So what are your thoughts on the disease so far, and how do you compare it to others we've talked about? It's pretty nasty, huh?
Disgusting.
Yeah, it doesn't have that 90% mortality rate the bubonic plague had, right? And I tell you, I wouldn't want those giant nodules appearing on my neck. And by the way, I want to hear y'all's thoughts. What do you think about it compared to other plagues? It's definitely
I
not.
don't care about any of those other diseases. I don't want that.
It's
No,
not
no,
appetizing.
no,
I can say that,
no,
right?
no,
You
no.
you don't want to eat lunch while you watch this episode,
Ew.
right? But what do you think of this compared to other diseases? Y'all, people like Quinn, DeHavius, y'all tuned in to all these other Pandemic Wednesdays. What do you think? How does it compare to the ones y'all have read about? Let me know in the comment sections.
I don't want scabs. No, I can't even say it. I can't even.
Okay, so the loss of his adopted brother, Marcus Aurelius, would go on to be the sole emperor of Rome. And this is where the plague gets its name. He would be made famous for his ability to hold the empire together during this time, right? So the Justinian flu is kind of seen as, or the Justinian plague as, it was blamed on him, right? He was a nincompoop. He failed, right? It's definitely not the most appealing disease. Yeah, I don't want this thing. But this is kind of known as the opposite, right? He's kind of seen as a hero for overcoming this plague
Job.
and leading empire through it, right?
Good job.
Now, the question I ask is, have y'all ever seen the movie Gladiator? And this is the same guy, right? This is Marcus Aurelius. His son Claudius is going to become the emperor, and he's going to be the one that kind of really makes the Gladiator games famous. But this is that guy, right?
Never seen that movie, but okay.
I might have to show you that movie. It's a really good movie. So if you've ever seen the movie Gladiator, we're talking about this guy. Yeah, I tell you, I'm with DeHavius. If I saw somebody with this thing, I'd probably puke just looking at him. But this is the emperor, right? This is that guy. If you've ever seen Gladiator,
Just thinking about it, so like I can't. No.
right? And if you ever seen the movie Gladiator, Marcus Aurelius is kind of seen as like this wise old king who was kind of a good guy. And of course, his son is kind of blamed as the guy that sets in motion the fall of the empire. But the father is, he's kind of remembered fondly. Now, as the disease spread through Rome, the Roman Empire, the dead would continue to pile up. The disease would end up killing up to 70 million people. A third of the entire empire dies of this disease. Right? 70 million people. Now, that's a rough estimate. I've seen it as low as 50 million. But still, we're talking about a lot of dead people, right? Now, what would be some problems with a third of the people losing their lives all at once? Right? Think about it today, right? What would be some problems with a third of Americans dying? And let me know in the comment section, what do y'all think would be some of the problems?
Something that's good that might come out of it there. The prices on things might go down there.
Yeah, but what are some problems, right? Like, think about what are some problems caused if a third of the people died?
I might not have as much doctors.
Yeah, okay, so think about those specific...
or teachers.
Yeah, those specific...
jobs.
Yeah, I was thinking professions, I guess. You know, if you lose a heavy amount of doctors, which you got to mention, they lost a lot of doctors trying to fight this thing. Then all of a sudden, you don't have doctors to fight other diseases. You gave the example of teachers. What happens? You lose a lot of, a heavy amount of teachers. Teachers always get sick real easy. When we're crammed together with a bunch of little kids, and kids aren't exactly the most hygienic of people. Most teachers all talk about, the freshman crud. Freshmen, I'm probably preaching to choir on y'all. Man, freshmen are nasty. Like, you'd be shocked how many freshmen I taught that didn't understand that they need to take a shower. Right? Sometimes I teach freshmen, and man, they go a week without taking a shower. Let's see. The economy would collapse, mental health problems, society would start to shut down. Well, think about it, too. What happens if you lose a lot of farmers? Then how do we feed people? So it's like one of these, one hand washes the other as far as just all kinds of bad. Yeah, it'd be like Endgame, right? It doesn't take a lot of monkey wrenches in the system to really mess the system up, right? So an infectious disease like this was part of Roman life thanks to it being a cultural hub, right? They were not at all not used to having infectious disease, right? Which is one of the reasons we believe that Europeans had such a strong tolerance to disease. One of the common means of fighting disease, and it was something they tried to use on smallpox, survival of the fittest, that's right, was something called bloodletting. Nope. And what they would do is they would try to drain your blood, but not to the point that it killed you. And one of the ways they would do this was through leeches, right? They're these little parasitic, little slimy, eel-looking things, and they just suck blood. They'll get on you and they'll suck your blood out. And so Galen would recall a member of the Roman gentry who he was writing about how he constantly was drinking the drinking water and would sometimes accidentally drink leeches because they were using so many leeches it was getting in their drinking water. Just because they were using so many leeches trying to get rid of the smallpox. That was the only way they knew of to try to combat it, was they thought that maybe these leeches could literally suck the poison out of the smallpox, right? Of course, it didn't work, but they're kind of trying to grasp at straws. Okay, so obviously that did not work, right? You can't cure smallpox by sticking a leech on you and letting it suck it out. It doesn't work that way, right? What are some other of the pseudosciences you've heard during COVID-19? I'm hearing all kinds of it. Of course, we see that hydroxychloroquine, however you say
Someone said, if you drink Lysol, then you will be cured. Yes, you will be cured, because you will be dead.
Yeah, plastic surgeons can still use leeches. Yeah, I'm not saying it has no purpose, but it's not going to help you with smallpox. Some of the ones I think of, they've actually had a horrible time on a botched episode, yeah. They've had a horrible time with people trying to destroy 5G towers because they think 5G is causing COVID-19. 5G, right? They're like, well, what caused it was the 5G internet, right? You have 3G and 4G internet. Yeah. The cell phone towers. Yeah.
Your cell phone caused COVID-19.
Right. The one I found that was funny is when the president was talking about, so DeHavius talked about it, 5G causing coronavirus. The one I kind of think about too is Trump talking about maybe we can inject ourselves with Clorox to get rid of the virus.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen all
Oh
kinds of stuff in it.
my gosh.
Yeah,
Don't
all
drink
kinds of
some
conspiracy
bleach
theories.
and you'll be cured.
Another one is he was talking about injecting light in you. You could
Light?
Yeah, you could inject yourself with light somehow. I don't know how that works.
Like sunlight?
Yeah, like stick a flashlight inside of you and get rid of the corona. I don't know.
Let's go.
I don't know. It was hard to figure out what he was talking about. So yeah, there's a lot of pseudoscience going around about COVID-19.
If you wipe enough, then you won't be able to get coronavirus and like.
Yeah. So at the outbreak of the plague, Rome's military consisted of 28 legions, totaling approximately 150,000 men. Most legions were well-trained, well-armed, and well-prepared. However, none of that could prevent them from catching the disease, falling ill, and dying. So they lost nearly half of their army. Yeah, that was something going around, Davey. It was bonkers. So, yeah, people are crazy. Absolutely. So why does losing so many troops present an especially big problem for Rome? Why do you think it's an especially big problem to lose your military, your army if you're Rome? What do you think?
Rome's entire thing was built on their army.
Well, think about it. You know, they stored up treasures, right? And, you know, there's a lot of other, like the Gauls and stuff like that would love to come in and attack Rome and steal their wealth, right? You know, it's one of those, like, to be the man, you got to beat the man type thing. You know, they built up a lot of enemies. You know, you can't hoard that much wealth and not create a lot of enemies. So there's a lot of empires that would love to have come in and wiped out the Roman Empire. Yeah, it made them vulnerable, right? They didn't even have the means to protect themselves, let alone continue expanding the empire. So disease would hit Rome so hard that even the wealthy and powerful could not avoid it. It would begin to decimate the aristocracy to such a degree that entire councils struggled to meet. Local magistrates went unfulfilled, and the community organizers failed for lack of members. So this also brings with it its own problem. You know, think about it this way, and I don't know, maybe be good, but what would our country be like if a third of our leaders just went away? You know, and you think about it, it's like, talk about society breaking down, right? Like if we, you know, imagine you woke up one day and there was no...
What would it be like in the 1900s, like in the 1800s, like whenever the country was being founded, like when we were going against Great Britain,
right?
Like if George Washington just like, poof, I'm gone.
Right, well think about it, if you lost
Abraham Lincoln,
all
poof.
the leaders of FEMA in the middle of a hurricane. You know, I mean, it's got all kinds of externalities that go with it, extra problems that go with it, where, you know, society relies on certain individuals making tough decisions for the collective, right? What happens if those decisions just aren't getting made? You know, it's really a really crazy thing to think of. You know, one of the most difficult things to deal with is, you know, lack of leadership. Of course, we see where good leadership has really helped us and where bad leadership or no leadership really harms us. So, you know, that kind of plays into a factor. Now, the death toll reduced the number of taxpayers and farmers at a time of increasing expenses. The empire began to sink in a very bad depression, right? So they're kind of entering their own version of a Great Depression. The poor just began to pile up. It killed so much of the peasantry.
Did the poor pile up, or did all the wealthy people think, I can't catch this friggin' disease, and they went out and they caught a disease and all the rich people died, and then it just seemed like all the poor people were...
Well, no, now I'll tell you, the poor people are going to get hit almost probably the worst of it, just because poor people are less likely to be able to practice proper hygiene, right? They're not taking showers, they're not washing their hands and stuff like that. But anyway, it would kill so much of the peasantry that it began to depopulate entire towns over the countryside, from Egypt all the way to Germany. The psychological effects, if anything, were even more profound. You really start getting the sentiment of the end of the world is near, right? Like, this is it, right? You know, imagine if you woke up one day and all of Denham Springs, you know, we live in Denham, right? If, you know, a third of Denham Springs is gone. Like, entire stores are closed, they're just wiped out, right? So what are the problems of the loss of so much of the labor class?
Mom, where is everyone?
Yeah, where are my comments at? But what are the problems with so much of the labor class being lost? Like, who does the work? Right? Think about it, like, we lost our labor class today. Somebody's got to come pick up the garbage. Somebody's got to come dig the ditches and put the roofs on houses and, cook your food or, whatever, right? And if they're not doing those jobs, who's doing it?
Do we even have a labor class there?
No, yeah, we have a labor class. I would consider myself part of the labor. Well, I don't know. Well, I know when I was repairing a fence the other day, I was definitely labor class. But yeah, absolutely. Like, there's a bunch of houses in the neighborhood getting their roofs repaired right now. So a teacher, Aurelius Aristides. Oh, that's fine. That's fine if you're just listening in the background. Yeah, there's no one to do the hard work. That's absolutely right. Anyway, he survived a nearly lethal case of the plague during his first pass. So this is a teacher who himself survived smallpox. Yeah, I would say Rachel's, I don't know, it's not hard labor for sure, but definitely labor class. Anyway, he would have become convinced that he had only survived it because the gods had chosen to take a young boy instead of himself, and he even identified the young boy. Yeah, and I got you, we're talking about hard labor. And many would experience something known as survivor's guilt. And my question is, have you ever experienced survivor's guilt? Let me tell you, I have. And it wasn't with somebody that even actually died. When I thought my brother was going to die, I really experienced that. It really had a huge impact on me, thinking that the last thing I was going to say to my brother was that I hated him. And when he spent 2 months in a medical coma, I spent that 2 months every night thinking, oh, please God, don't let the last thing I said to my brother be I hate him. And it really had a huge impact on me. I mean, here I am as a 40-year-old man talking about something happened to me when I was 10 years old. And it's still one of the most profound impactors in my life.
He was like, what, 7?
He was 7, I was 10, yeah. So,
and got into like an argument or something.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you see this all the time. Like maybe a parent loses a kid, maybe you lose a sibling or a grandparent, and the impact of their death just has this huge impact on you. Where it doesn't have to be bad, right? Sometimes it guilts you into being a better person, right? You think like, man, did I waste my time with this person?
13 years later,
right?
The last thing you did to him was
right. So, have you ever experienced that? Maybe you have a loved one, or maybe you have a family member that's experienced that survivor's guilt. But yeah, it definitely started impacting. There's people that would lose a loved one, and they're like, why me? Why did I survive and they died? Most of all, the disease spread fear. Smallpox killed massively and gruesomely and in waves. The fear among the Romans was so pronounced back then that today archaeologists are working all over the imperial territory. They still find amulets and stones and stuff carved by people trying desperately to ward off the pestilence. Right? They would constantly carve something like praying to a god or a goddess or something like that. Anything they can think of, talismans, something to ward off. Today I think about it like, those people that believe that like crystals have healing properties, stuff like that. Anything to try to get rid of the disease, right? Now, many Romans responded to the plagues by calling on their gods. Many cities across the Roman Empire, I think there's going to be a lot of that with COVID-19. You see a lot of videos of people that were saying it was a hoax, and then they lost somebody they loved, and it's like it was a rude awakening for them. But anyway, many cities across the Roman Empire...
The people that are dying are not actually dying. It's just a joke. And then someone you love dies.
Yeah.
Never mind, it's not a joke.
Yeah. Many cities across the Roman world sent delegates to Apollo asking for the gods' advice about how to survive. Despite their cries for help, their gods did nothing. Right? So they're calling out to their pantheon of gods, and it's not getting any better.
Right. Dear Athena.
Now, here's my question. I don't want to get too... I don't want to sound anti-religious, because I'm not. I'm a religious person. But how does this provide a warning for us today? The idea of... How do I word this? The thing I kind of think about is you see that Facebook meme about, it shows the picture of Jesus going around. And he's like, sorry, you're going to have to quarantine with everybody else. You know, that kind of jokey thing. But and I mean that to be serious and kind of lighthearted in a way. Which, look, I'm not saying don't have faith during this pandemic. I'd have to have faith, right? I have to have it, right? But you know, there's also an element of it too. Of you see a lot of people. It's like, well, I'm immune to COVID because I pray a lot. And the reality is, there's no basis in reality of that.
What?
It's that old adage of God will only help those that help themselves type thing. It's kind of how I see it. I'm not saying don't have faith, but you also still going to have common sense, right?
Wow.
I have faith that there's a greater purpose in life, but I don't have faith that if I walk out in the middle of a street in rush hour, that I'm not going to get hit by a car. You got to practice kind of common sense with that. There's a reason God gave us, if you're a person of faith, there's a reason God gave us our intelligence to have science. Yeah, He wants us to learn if you're somebody of faith, So I think it kind of serves as a cautionary tale. That there's nothing wrong with having faith, but you also have to have common sense and science as well.
We don't need science.
Yeah. So Marcus Aurelius launched began to persecute Christians. He began to believe that this new religion, this Christianity, was angering the gods, and that's what caused smallpox. You had these people going around saying that their God, this Jesus guy, was the one true God, and all these other gods are fake, and the gods are getting angry about this growing Christianity, right? And he began to persecuting them, holding them responsible for the plague. It's their fault. However, his persecution will have the opposite effect. Because of the Christian mandate to help those that were in need, Christians were the most willing to provide the most basic needs of things like food and water for those that were ill. So you had a lot of people that had smallpox, and they were just seeking help, right? Doctors wouldn't touch them. Nobody would give them food or water, and a lot of Christians put their own health at risk to go out and help these people that were stricken with smallpox. And because of that, it created this huge explosion of goodwill towards Christians. Think about it. If you're somebody with smallpox and you're starving to death and you're dying of dehydration because nobody will go near you to give you food or water, and a Christian puts their own health at risk, or anybody, right? And then they come to you and say, look, I'm coming out here and I'm willing to help you because that's what my faith tells me to do. It's going to make you kind of think, man, I got to listen to what this person has to say. The simple level of nursing care provided good feeling towards Christians, leading to a mass conversion. They were at the front lines. And one of the things about when I think faith really inspires me is when you see things like, with the flood, the Cajun Navy, right? People that just said, I got to go out and do what I can to help out my fellow man. And to me, this is where, me as a Christian, full disclosure, this is where I think Christianity gets it right. When you see things like people helping people in need because of their faith, that's when it inspires me to be a better Christian. And this is really what put Christianity on the map, right? The fact that during the middle of this plague, they were the most willing to put themselves in danger. And so, the kind of question is, how does somebody who is willing to be kind and put themselves in danger kind of change how you see them? What do you think, Elizabeth? How do you think that would change how you would see somebody? What do you think?
I'm trying to figure out how to word it. So I don't know. If someone were I don't know. I don't know how to word it. I don't know. Basically, if you're being I don't know the word that I'm trying to say, but I don't know. Fill in the blank word for your religion. Because I don't know the word. And then you help someone that really needs your help at that time, I guess you could say. Then they're gonna think really highly of you and not
right.
Persecute was the word that I was looking for.
Right. Well, it changed the way you see him. I kind of think about it, and I'm not going to say his name because somebody might be a fan, but there was a pastor of a mega church that there was a really bad hurricane in Houston, right? And he had all the wealth you could ever imagine, and he just shut his church down. Could have used it as a shelter, and he's like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not letting all these poor people in. And he caught a lot of crap for that. And this guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And all I kept thinking of, and I'm not trying to doubt his faith or anything, but I kept thinking, if you're worth, let's say, $300 million, if you were to go down to a country, and I used Indonesia just because I've experienced Indonesia, but I said, if you went down to Indonesia, which is a mostly Islamic country, and I would say the average person in Indonesia, I won't say hates Christians, but they don't think highly of them, right? If this person were to take his hundreds of millions of dollars and just start going and paying off people's medical bills, right? Or feeding people, right? Just buying them food and stuff like that, right? Imagine how many people he would convert to Christianity, or at the very least, change how they think about Christians. He could literally change an entire country how they see the faith of Christianity in one lifetime, just taking his hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'll sit there and think, what a huge impact he could have on the world with that money, and he just doesn't. And it's like, what is he taking that money to? He can't take it with him, and it kind of tells you, like, well, what are their motives, and Kiera says, I would see them differently as they would before, and I think Rachel knows what I'm talking about. She said, I used to be a fan of that pastor. I read most of his books, and it certainly removed the fondness I have of him actually questioning his motives. And you got to wonder, like, you sit there and think, like, if you're a pastor, well, what is your purpose in life? Is your purpose not to, the very word gospel is supposed to be sharing the good news, and if you're hoarding wealth,
if we're talking about
letting people
Christians
suffer
and money, God says that you can either build up your treasures in heaven.
That's right. Yeah, what an impact it could have. Even if it doesn't convert people, it could change the way they see the faith, right?
They could just
and so Lee says by their action,
like,
absolutely.
Okay, they would be like, okay, I don't want to be this religion, but I at least they're okay.
Right. So the Christian faith also offered a meaning to life and death in times of crisis. Now keep in mind, they believed everybody went to hell, right? The Romans did. Everybody went to Hades, Hades and Tartarus, right? So those who survived gained comfort in knowing that their loved ones who had died as Christians would receive rewards in heaven. And of course, I put a picture of Jesus and his disciples up. I always love to squeeze this in whenever I can. I actually had a conversation about this today. That is probably what Jesus looked like. So if you ever see the white Caucasian Roman Jesus walking around, this is what Jesus looked like.
I've seen so many documentaries on like the Bible and stuff like that, and they'll show like Jesus. I'm like, that's not what Jesus looks like.
Right. So I love sliding that in whenever we can. So this is the earliest portrait of Jesus we could find.
Man, Jesus.
This was painted by somebody who would have been alive around the time of Jesus. Nice. So why do you think this message of heaven made the religion especially appealing during this time? Right? You think about it, like if you're, let's say,
you got eternal life.
Right. Like let's say your brother died, or my brother died, and you tell me, one religion says that he built up treasures and he's being rewarded in heaven. And the other one says, yeah, he's burning in hell with Hades. I'll tell you this, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to think about my brother burning for eternity. So, you can definitely see the appeal of Christianity, particularly during the middle of a plague. Yeah, absolutely. So, as communities began to fall apart, the Romans reinforced them. Emperor Marcus Aurelius responded to the death of so many soldiers by recruiting slaves and gladiators to their legions. And my thing is, why do you think he turned it to gladiators to make up the military? Why do you think he would use gladiators as soldiers? What do you think?
Because weren't gladiators the one that were thrown in the...
Yeah, these are guys that literally have been fighting all their life. Like, literally are fighting for their lives. And DeHavia said, yeah, it gave them the peace of mind when they died. Absolutely. That's a huge aspect, right? It gives them an answer to the meaning of life. Absolutely. But yeah, I think they turned to gladiators because, even though they don't understand battle tactics, these dudes could fight. They were well-conditioned, well-trained. They weren't going to freak out in the middle of a battle. These were peak physical specimen people. Now, they filled the abandoned farms, yeah, and they trained all the time. Not in battle formations, but at least in combat.
Yeah, they would throw them in the ring with the lions.
And here's one of the things I love, and this is where I think he really made the empire great. To bring in, to kind of repopulate the farms and all these manual labor jobs, he really opened up the country or the empire to immigrants. And that's when the country really started to explode in power and wealth. And this is kind of my proof of diversity is its own reward, right? So cities that lost large numbers of aristocrats replaced them with various other means. You know, think about it. If you have a great leader come in from, say, China, maybe they have a different way of looking at running government. And they get to add that. Yeah, by the way, don't forget to drop a like on the video. Thank you so much. He kept the empire going despite death and terror on a scale that no one had ever seen. And, you know, a big part of that was he now gained the wealth of the diversity of good ideas from diversity. You know, if you ask me, hey, we got a problem to solve, and I'm going to put 10 people in a room, do you want 10 people that have all grown up in the exact same place and shared the same ideas and same experiences? Or do you want 10 people from around the world that all could see a problem from a different point of view? You know, and that's the wealth of diversity, you know. And so I ask, you know, what are some benefits today of having so many immigrants in America? You know, when people talk about what makes America great, to me it's diversity. You know, and what are some benefits to you to experiencing diversity in your life?
When someone's like racist and it's just like a racist comment, I know it's not true.
Right. But I mean, what are some practical ways diversity helps you? Like some physical ways?
I don't know.
Well, I think about it from the standpoint of food. You know, think all the different foods we get to try.
I didn't know if that's like what you meant.
You think about it from the standpoint of food. Okay, so you know, whenever we need medical advice, who's the doctor we always go ask for advice?
Hitesh.
Yeah, we ask Dr. Cheta, right? You know, and if I didn't have inclusion in my life, and I said, well, he's not a white guy, I'm not hanging out with him, I wouldn't have him to draw on.
Wait, what about Miss Nikki?
Yeah, same with Miss Nikki, right? So, yeah, you know, it allows you to open up the door to all this different ways of looking at stuff. You know, some of my best students in my classes are from all kinds of different backgrounds, and they get to bring that background to my class. How many times have I ever been talking about the Asian experience or the Indian experience or even the black experience, and I get to draw upon my students to give me their perspective. So yeah, it's huge, right? You know, or if I'm sitting there talking about the Latin world, you know, I can talk to some of my Latin students, you know, and they can draw on those real world examples. And, you know, when I'm talking about current events, you know, and I'll tell you, it educates me. I've learned so much from students by having diverse students that I would have never learned if I had nothing but white kids. So it helps me, I feel like, be a better teacher, having that diversity. Now, Rome would go on to rebuild. People slowly would develop immunity to the disease, and soon cases of the disease were almost non-existent. So, here's my question. How do you see us getting over this pandemic? You know, I was talking to doctors. It looks like a vaccine is at least 18 months away. How do you see this ending? What do you think, Elizabeth?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to really end. Not even after we have the vaccine. I think it's going to change American culture. You know, maybe something as simple as we wash our hands more, we give up shaking hands, more hand sanitizer, stuff like that.
We might have breaks during, like, we might have like a separate bell inside classes just to go wash your hands.
Could be, absolutely. Yeah, could be.
Or they might come over on the intercom and be like, at this time, students may leave to wash their hands.
Well, I think about something as simple as like, you know, how are we going to do things like movies? I don't know how that works. Like,
they probably will
going back to a movie theater. I don't know when that happens.
They'll probably put the seats further away.
Yeah, could be, you know. So, you know, I think there's going to be a combination of we're never really going to get over it.
The desks might
mixed
be
with,
60
hopefully
away.
We'll have enough people develop an immunity to it. That's kind of my hope too, is that, kind of herd immunity. Hopefully we do get a vaccine. But I'm curious, what do you think? Well, how do y'all think we get over this? Do you think we get over this really? What are some ways you think this is going to permanently change our culture? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm curious what y'all have to say. Now, the Roman resolve would endure, and they would see this as a great example of the Roman spirit. No more buffets. That could be a problem. Yeah, I think it'll change the whole world's culture. Absolutely. People that would write about this after the turn of the 3rd century, Roman senator and historian Cassius Dio called the empire under Marcus a kingdom of gold that persevered admirably amidst an extraordinary difficulty. So a lot of people saw this as like a golden age of Rome, despite their the plague, right? So, you look at the benefits, how the empire grew out of it even stronger than it was before. You had all that diversity. You had more immigrants there than ever before. I mean, it completely restructured the way Rome was. Like, Rome was no longer a bunch of white dudes walking around. You added all that diversity to it and all that different culture and literally flavor, right? It's all mannequins in between for social distancing.
I couldn't do that.
I think I'm with you, Davies. I don't think it'll ever go away completely. I think we'll just learn how to deal with it. Anyway, he said the Antoine Plague was a this is what a modern historian, a guy named John Horgan, who I read last night. He's a historian for the Ancient History Encyclopedia. And he said the Antoine Plague was a far deadlier than COVID-19. The society it hit was far less capable of saving the sick than we are now. But Rome survived. Its communities rebuilt, and the survivors even came to look back on it as a time of plague with an odd nostalgia for what it showed them about the strength of the society and their government. And I think that's where the hope comes from, right? Hopefully there's some good permanent changes that come from this pandemic. I really hope that there could be. It may be something as very simple as us being more respectful of one another, us realizing that we're all in this together, right? I wish more people would realize that, to the point where it would really make more of a difference. But, it kind of shows us how globally collected we all are. That when one country gets a cold, we all get sick, type thing. I think there's some good lessons to be learned about this. The big lesson is we are all in this together. And I think one of the best lessons to be learned is we're only as healthy as our least cared for people. I think that's a huge lesson to be learned from this. We're only as healthy as our sickest individuals. So I think there's some great lessons to be learned out of this that we can really learn from and build a better America out of. So that's it. That's kind of my happy ending to it, is look, the Roman Empire, which was far less capable of dealing with plague than we are, and this plague was far worse than the plague we're dealing with. Not only did they survive, they were a better empire for it. They grew even stronger out of it. And hopefully that's what happens to America. I hope that is. I hope that we learned a lot of really great lessons from this, and it really makes this country a better country. And it could. This could be the start of ushering in some great renaissance of understanding and appreciating science, understanding and appreciating each other and how we're all in this together. The whole kit and caboodle, right? So, hopefully this is an inspirational story, that a worse plague hit a country less prepared and they came out better for it. And maybe we do too. But it's going to take a lot of willpower on our part. So that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for joining me on this Pandemic Wednesday. I am so glad. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you, somebody told me this. If y'all look at the channel, we hit 100 subscribers. So thank you so much, 100 people.
Somebody told him. I just told him.
Well, you did too. Actually, Nirali told me yesterday. She congratulated me. I meant to say that. Thank you for everybody that's made us a part of this channel. Hopefully 200 down the pipeline, I hope. But thank you so much for the subscriptions. I appreciate all of y'all. Hit a like for me. I appreciate it. Help promote the channel. promote learning. And listen, thank y'all for your dedication and your education. And that's going to do it. Again, I'm off tomorrow, but I'll be back on Friday. Thank you for the congratulations, Gare. I appreciate it. But yeah, thank you so much. And listen, thank y'all for your dedication to your education.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
dedication
Davius. And listen, a big part of it is y'all. Y'all made it possible. Thank you so much. Look, I hope y'all continue watching this thing 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. As long as people are watching, I'll keep doing it. So, but yeah, thank you so much. And listen, I really appreciate y'all. Y'all make it worth it. So, until next time, goodbye.